It says welcome and apologies, but the bit I will say to start is the Welsh statement. And it says here, just to confirm, as a council we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that we've not received any notification requests to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. Then the other little bit, noticing I got two of them. Silence or off, please. Very simple request, and I'm going to do the same thing myself. I know some place when I read it, if you did ring in the middle of it was a donation to charity. I'm sure we can all do that one. I'm just as guilty myself on this. Okay. Right, thank you very much indeed. Apologies, please. I think we're all here, aren't we?
Yeah, there are no apologies.
That's brilliant. That's lovely. Right, have we got the other bit on there? Here we have. Declarations of interest. Have we got a lawyer? Have we? No. I think it's along...
Yeah, I think we're just taking our lead from the last meeting with...
Sorry.
No declarations were requested. If anyone obviously does come up with anything during the course of the meeting, please say so.
Thank you, Tom, for reminding me. That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So, note that. That's lovely. Right, next... fun with this. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. Right, so we'll go through that, which is page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. Can somebody move that, please? Thank you. Then, obviously, from that, matters arising. Has anybody got any matters arising? I hear deafening silence. Brilliant. So, I take that there's no matters arising. Thank you. So, next item on the agenda is what we're here for, which is the public... action sheet. Sorry, I knew there was an action sheet in here, so it always is. These always... which is agenda item number 4. You want to fill us in on that? Sorry.
Well, the recommendations from the last meeting were sent out, responded to, and sent out again, so I think they should all be done.
Comments on that at all? Deafening silence again. Brilliant. Thank you. Now I'm on to agenda item 5, which was what I was trying to preempt. And it's Public Service Board draft wellbeing plan for Torfaen, and we are considering the main. What are we considering? I will let up to you to outline it at the moment.
Well, obviously, members received the draft wellbeing plan at the last meeting. At the conclusion of that meeting, it was decided that you'd like to revisit the plan following the consultation period to see how the plan had been updated and to make some final comments before the plan was signed off by each of the public bodies, including our council.
Introductions would be a very good thing. So if we start that end and work our way around, I'm sure we'll introduce ourselves and our committee as well.
I'm Jennifer Evans. I'm a principal with the Nyren Bevan Gwent Public Health Team.
I'm Dewi Johnson, and Group Manager for Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent, working for South Wales Fire and Rescue Service.
Fen Turner, I work for Natural Resources Wales.
Rachel O'Shaughnessy, I'm the Sustainability Manager at Torfaen Council.
Sue Brown, I'm Partnerships and Policy Manager for Torfaen Council.
Afternoon everyone, my name is Lyndon Puddy, I'm Head of Public Services Support Unit here in Torfaen.
Good afternoon, I'm Neil Taylor, I'm the Senior Policy Advisor to the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Councillor Gwyn Jenkins.
Councillor Elizabeth Haynes.
Councillor Claire Thomas, and I represent Two Locks and Headless.
I'm Councillor Peter Jones.
Tom Roberts, Scrutiny Support Officer.
And your chair for the day, Stuart Ashley, Councillor Stuart Ashley, and
Dominic Redmond from Democratic Services.
which is really important. And it says on the bit of paper I've got here, it says ask Lyndon Puddy to talk briefly on it, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, Chair, just wanted to outline some detail really around where we're coming from. And I'll give you a little bit of a progress from the last scrutiny meeting we had. It's very important that, as you did last time, for me just to emphasise, this is a partnership plan. It isn't owned by the council. It isn't managed by the council. We help administer it. But this plan has been devised in conjunction with a wide group of partnership stakeholders, many of which are around the table today. And I'd like to personally thank every one of these officers here that have made a massive input into this plan, because we wouldn't have got there without their input. But it is an unusual thing within scrutiny that this isn't just a council-managed process, and I just wanted to put that into the forefront of your minds, that as we go through scrutiny this afternoon, and you may have a number of questions that we'll be looking around the room for our partners to be answering some of those questions and queries, particularly around some of the expertise that they have at that point. So if you look at me, I may be looking at someone else. That's all I'm putting that out in front of everyone here. But it's been a very long journey to get us to this stage, and a huge amount of blood, sweat and tears has gone into developing this high-level plan, where we are looking to start to get some sign-out across the partnerships and within our own decision-making structure. But just in terms of where we were from the last plan, and I've tried to be brief with this, Chair, last session that we had prior to Christmas. Within section 1 of the plan, there's been emphasised the paragraph on longer-term planning, and there's more to do around understanding and connect our communities. And interestingly, the Future Generations Commissioner, Sophie Howe, went to a Monmouthshire scrutiny meeting earlier on around some of the lack of detail in the wellbeing plans, and her view of that was that she's not expecting to have too much detail in these plans at the moment, because they are very much positioning where the wellbeing objectives are within the area, and the planning process will go on over the next 12 to 18 months as a part of that process. And really looking at where we look at setting our objectives and the steps that we need to take. It isn't business as usual. This is very much a non-duplication of an LSB process. This is very much what are we doing above and beyond what we normally do as corporate business right across the partnerships that we all belong to as part of our individual organisations. We've added an Appendix 1 within Section 1, setting up the links between organisational wellbeing objectives and the PSB wellbeing objectives, just to give that link across, to ensure people that are looking at the plan and fewer scrutiny members that we are making those linkages. And we've also brought forward a section on making the connections from Section 3 in the report earlier on, which was one of the concerns that scrutiny had last time. And we tried to make it clearer by adding in Appendix 2 how that shows within the national, regional and local strategies, plans and partnerships, because we're very conscious of the fact that we don't want to be duplicating where activity is going on elsewhere, and using scrutiny we want to be assured that we are making the connections across the various strategies, plans and other elements that are up there, in particular the social services and wellbeing regional plan, to which we have made the connectivity. There was no change in Section 2 other than we split the paragraphs, which had ease of reading. Within Section 3, which is on page 11 of the plan, we've added a table to 3.2 on involving our citizens and demonstrating the support of PSB objectives from the recent consultation that we've undertaken. We've provided 2 appendices relating to the consultation, which is in your documents as Appendix 3 and 4, one providing the public comment from summer 2017, and Appendix 4 is a summary of the autumn consultation responses that, again, scrutiny asked us to to consider as part of the last scrutiny. And all this information will be used now as we move through into the planning process and the development of subgroups, and subgroups leads in developing the activities that we require to do under the 7 wellbeing objectives. Within section 4 of the plan, we've added in the PSB vision statement, which was mistakenly admitted from the previous consultation, so that's now clearly in the plan. The rest of the section remains unchanged. Within section 5, we separated out the narrative on how the PSB will work together from section 3.4 in the consultation version to section 5. It makes it more prominent in that case that the PSB will seek to change. Our partners work together to drive some of the transformational change that we need to in public services, and we've started those wider discussions in the more recent Public Service Board workshop sessions that we've had, one with the PSB in itself and one as a joint committee with the OSG. Sorry, joint group, not a committee. And really we're setting out the 7 key areas for change, which is listed on page 13 of the plan, and it's referred to directly within Appendix 5, which we're looking at the framework for service design, which picks up as well from the consultation and recommendation from the Future Generation Commissioners for public and services in Wales to use. So we're not only making our local connections, we're also ensuring that we are making the connections with what the Future Generations Commissioner is also asking us to do. We've also identified that this section highlights the place-based pilot that we're doing in Blaenavon, and of which we will use to explore and deliver a joint programme of work relating to how the PSB will work together. There is a matrix with examples of wider benefits associated with the pilot on page 14, but that is looking at one of our critical work, which is around healthy behaviours, and a lot of the development work and work that Rachel has done with Welsh Government to work on the pilot there and for the tender that's currently out. Section 6 will provide a deeper narrative on the 7 wellbeing objectives. I believe from the last scrutiny meeting we had, you raised that they could have been a deeper narrative on that, and highlights advice again from the Future Generations Commissioner in taking our time to develop the objectives. She isn't looking for us to dive in with this feet first and start rolling with it. She understands that this is a very high level strategic plan. It requires longer term planning before we can get to the stage of actually delivering plans. And again, we've given thoughts to our timelines. Again, this was brought up as part of the last previous scrutiny, and we've made it clearer what we mean by the short, medium and longer term, and that's on page 16 of the plan. Subsections on each objective are now more detailed, as are the tables to demonstrate the 5 ways of working against each of the objectives. And as I said earlier, we won't have the detailed plans for delivery set out at this stage. It is still very much a work in progress document on these are the high level wellbeing objectives that we are proposing to our partners to adopt. Within section 7, we've been able to add some further information on monitoring and evaluation. Section 8 picks up that we've included now an extra graphic to show the planning cycle going forward, so it's more informative and pictorial. I think from the last scrutiny meeting we had, you did ask whether we could use more diagrammatic elements within the plan rather than just pure narrative, and we tried to involve that in the process as well. We've added a thank you to the public and partners, along with all the contact details of the unit. And we've also took scrutiny advice from the last meeting we did, and we did a very quick and comprehensive piece of work to get an early, easy read version of it running prior to the draft consultation of the plan being concluded. So there's been considerable amount of work, Chair, since the last document that you've had in picking up on not just what scrutiny's views were, but also the feedback from the Public Service Board workshops that we've been having, and the comprehensive work that the Officer Support Group has put forward. I think I'll leave it there, Chair. I've talked long enough, and I just wanted to set the scene of what's changed since the last plan that you saw.
Thank you there, Lyndon. And I draw just members' attention to what we've been asked to look at. It's always that bit suggested scrutiny activity, and it says here the added detail of the main body of the plan, the added detail to the tables, the 7 objectives and areas for activity to deliver the plan and the contents and the appendices, which is what you've drawn your attention to, really. So, without much ado, we've got some questions here, which actually lead on quite nicely from what you said, and I'll start there. Members, would you start with number one question, please?
Can you turn your mic off, Chair?
Yeah, I'm about to do that, yes.
Thanks. That was very helpful, Lyndon. We've met previously before this committee to discuss the range of questions we're going to ask you, and we've put that into 3 parts. We're going to chat about the previous recommendations. We've got a few issues there. Then we'd like to go through the wellbeing objectives, and we've got some questions around those. And then we'll finish off by asking you some stuff around the future monitoring of the wellbeing plan. So that's our approach today. And the first part is looking at our previous recommendations, and I'll start off with the first question, which is, and you led into this quite nicely with your closing remarks around the consultation process. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of the responses received? Now, I know you said there was an annex, and then following the consultation, can you give us a little bit of understanding of what changes you made as a result of the consultation and the result of the workshop, and what changed as a result of the consultation process? That's what our first sort of leading question, please.
I'll start that one off for you, Councillor. We had around about 50 responses to the consultation this time round, which may seem a bit low. We were quite pleased with it, but we'd also, if you recall, had quite a lot of engagement and consultation responses earlier on last summer and during the previous year when we did the assessment. So this wasn't the first time we'd gone to the public with this, and I think some people were sort of commenting when our engagement officers were out, well, we've already had a say in this, really. So we were quite pleased with what we had back. The content of the consultation were more comments in agreement with the direction we were going on, and making some suggestions from the public about things that we could do when we get to the detailed planning bits. So Appendix 4 to the plan, my colleague Andy Wilson has broken it down under each question and the comments that came in and the levels of support, and we'll be sharing that detail with the leads for each of the 7 objective groups so that those comments can be used. We've also got where people told us they wanted to be involved, so we have their contact details, and when we come to those groups, people will be given those individuals' contacts so they can contact them and say, do you want to be involved now in helping us to shape the actions that we develop going forward? You know, this is an area of interest you've indicated. For what changed in the plan, I think Rachel and I will probably say it didn't necessarily change the content of the plan, because their comments were more about quite high levels of support. We had some comments about it's another plan, what difference is it going to make? But the content of the plan itself I don't think has changed as a result, but it's more about how we use the comments that were made taken forward. Do you want to add anything to that, Rachel?
That's helpful, thank you. Shall I continue with the second question just for now? We're grateful for... I'm not going to hog the meeting, don't worry.
Yes, you are.
No, we're grateful that you spelt out the time frames, and you've given us the 3 distinct time frames. And I've listened to what you said about what Sophie Howe said about there are no... the details are going to follow later, but as a committee, we were interested within this plan, particularly in the first phase. Are there any quick wins?
I dare say that there probably will be. That there will be some quick wins along the way that we will obviously look to identify as we move progress. And of course, they fit in very well with the corporate plans of what our partners are trying to do and are taking forward. I recall from our last scrutiny committee, you were quite concerned that we didn't identify what those timeframes were in such a way. That's why we've tried to re-emphasise them in this one, to give you some reassurance that we've taken your views on board, and we try to go back with them. I think you can rest assured as a committee that if there is any low-hanging fruit or quick wins, as we call them, within the first few years of the, and particularly as we start to work on the pilot, that we won't be keeping those in abeyance once we wait for other things to catch up on things. But it will all depend on what comes from our delivery within the objectives, how we take the forward once the plan is approved. How are we taking forward into the delivery phase? We'll pick that up, and I think any opportunity that comes our way to move progress a little bit quicker, as partners, we will be taking that forward. So I think the committee can be rest assured that if there's anything there we can move on, we would be, or will be.
Does anybody else have any comments on this, please?
Just before I finish on that, Councillor, just to say that, of course, we do have to report on this as well, so you will see where things are.
Go on, Pete.
I'll
Come back on that. Yeah.
No, I mean, we're going to pick that up at the very end when I said we will look at what's going to happen in the future. So,
I'm interested to hear what else everybody else has to say on that. Obviously, being a partnership, but you emphasise that, Ben.
Absolutely, Councillor.
Yeah.
As an example of a potential quick win that could come through it, South Wales Fire Rescue Service identified that New Inn Fire Station is having a total refurb, £3 million of new fire station there, and we've gone out to our partners, such as the police and WAST, to see if they want to share that facilities, which is looking at the collaborative effect of working together long term, so that to the benefit of the population and the community in which we serve. So I'm looking for that to be sustainable as well. So there's a quick win, nice sort of ties into what you're looking at.
There's one of the steps in the plan is that we're going to look at all our assets as a collective public service, and we haven't done that yet. So that's one of the steps, and it would be a bit. We don't want to anticipate, but there will be quick wins there. But we haven't done it yet. But we have committed to doing that.
Come on, that, Pete.
no, they're the sort of details that we'd like to see. So I understand that, the details going to follow, as Lyndon had just said. So, yeah, I'm happy with that.
That bit about assets and resources is when it came up yesterday as well, strangely enough. So it's an obvious one, isn't it? Did you want to add something?
I do, Chair. Actually, I mean, Dewey's reminded me, and we've already got a precedent in Gwent in terms of shared services for blue light services. Abbott Lily is the one I would use as the example, which is working extremely well, and we'd look to replicate that as part of all of our estate. But in terms of low-hanging fruit, I think was the term that you used.
Expression, isn't it?
And in terms of us all looking at things from a common agenda, we already are producing with partners combined use of data around community safety, which is obviously important to all of us and indeed the community. The product that is being produced by Safer Gwent, which is a partnership approach that covers the whole of Gwent, has already provided specific data to the Torfaen area in terms of what the information suggests we need to be looking at as a collective. This is where this activity comes in. We start talking about other organisations' involvement in community safety. So that collaboration stuff is already going on and is already starting to identify and bear low-hanging fruit.
Do you have, it's a favourite subject of scrutinisers, do you have commonality of data? Because obviously, I imagine data share is a very common thing. And do you have compatibility of data?
We strive to achieve the utopian goal that is the compatibility of data. We have a data analyst that works particularly for the partnership world. One of her challenges, of course, is looking for the parity through the different types of data. Principally, it's focused currently on policing data, which is fairly standard from our world. But we, for example, quite heavily cross-reference with fire data, with A&E data, and things of that ilk. The process, and I was talking to the analyst just prior to this meeting now, is about finding out what the common issue is, and the example we were using earlier was antisocial behaviour. Go into the other organisations who also deal with antisocial behaviour to initially at least pool the data, so we all start talking about the same thing, with commonality of data in the pipeline. But I don't think it'll happen this year.
That's really interesting because some of us, I probably heard me say this before, service community councillors, and your chaps are pretty good at coming down to that level and conveying confidentially the stuff about what happens locally. So they're actually being able to do that, and fire people are pretty good at that as well. So the ability to be able to put that across, and they're part of this process as well. So that's quite comforting to hear that. Sorry. Yeah.
So I was just going to say that in relation to data and trying to identify those who are most vulnerable within our community, there's a vulnerability index project and a jigsaw project which are being combined by our chief, Hugh Chakeway, in order to take that through Welsh Government. In fact, he's having a conversation today, and there's a feasibility of identifying through the various data sets from the council, from health, from police and from fire, to identify those who are most vulnerable, so that we can target those, prevent them going into hospital, provide them with the services they need in a proactive, preventative way, but also identify those who are most vulnerable in emergency situation. Should we have floods and things of that nature, we know the individuals who are most at risk, and we know that we could target those individuals and concentrate our priority rescues and on those individuals as well.
Then
Quickly, Chair, picking up on both what Dowie and Neil has just mentioned around closer collaborative working, and for the committee's general understanding, we've now co-located within the community safety team in Pontypool Police Station now, community safety hub. So all community safety partners, it's all kitted out with IT and desks, and they meet there once a week on a Wednesday to discuss all issues of community safety. So we're bringing in the specialisms around community safety in one community safety hub, and to have those discussions and conversations. But the important thing is our partners can work from there with their Wi-Fi from their own organisations. So it is a fully collective hub of being able to join up the various community safety strands, have the discussions without having to call formal 115 meetings, where the discussions can take place within a safe environment where everybody works. So that again is working on some of the collaborative arrangements that we're already progressing as part of an authority.
you want to come back, Pete, on that?
Yeah, on that one. With this hub, would that involve not just the statutory partners? Would it involve, for example, charities which are involved in supporting substance misusers? Or would it involve the youth offending team, for example?
It definitely involves the youth offending team. It involves all stakeholders to do with an issue around community safety. So we would welcome the relative organisations. There's a standing invite for police, fire, youth offending service, probation, all within one if there's areas of concern around community safety. We're not wedded to statutory agencies alone. It's who can best contribute to an issue at the time. But of course, when we're discussing things around the community safety, we do have to be mindful of what we can appropriately discuss within across partners. But the willingness is already shown to be. I went over there last week and it was full. There's a lot of people there talking around and joining up community safety, and the crime and disorder reduction officer at Gwent Police sits in our team anyway. So we've already made that, and that's I think the only one in I think that's the only element in Gwent that is actually joined up in the way that it is. So we're actually trying to model a more collaborative approach. That's community safety based. This, of course, is much wider, but it's an example.
Thank you for that. Any more on that? Members, any more on that? For that?
Question on that. Can you just say what role do members have in that process? You said stakeholders. Members are a stakeholder as well. Members involved at any stage?
Not in the actual operation of community safety issues, no.
It's true to say the only time my experience of that is actually as a community councillor rather at this level, which Colette raises there about the member stakeholder and public stakeholder. Maybe that's something you need to look at.
It's what we can legally operate within the parameters of the community safety.
There are some issues that members can bring to the table that maybe, the other partners couldn't. So I think it is a valuable source of information as well.
Right, Have we, can we have the time, have we done the time frame question?
Yes.
Yeah, we have. Next question is question number 3. Who wants to do that one, Liz?
Hi. Under the affordable housing, the scrutiny committee originally recommended greater prominence given to affordable housing. Although the actual service board didn't want this to be a standalone improvement objective, it was stated that this would feature in the plan under one of the other objectives. What's the current thinking on this? Where are we with that?
I'll start us off.
I'm conscious I'm talking all the time, that's good.
There is, our RSLs, although they're not subject to the Act, they're very much partners around the table with us on this. They've actually put some actions into the collaboration tables under each of the objectives, and there's several under objectives 4 and 5 in particular around affordable housing. There's one statement about affordable housing itself under objective 4, I believe, and then there are some other things about helping tenants with their energy bills, with managing their finances, those at risk of poverty, etc. So although there isn't anything about affordable housing in the way of number we're building, land we're putting, that's more through the local development plan and the strategic housing forum and their work that way, but reflecting that housing is an important part of well-being in general.
It's unusual for NRW to say anything about housing, but I just wanted to make a point that the plan is about prevention. So whereas you may not see the words affordable housing, hopefully if we get this right, people won't need affordable housing anymore. So it's sort of a different take on what you would usually see when it comes to affordable housing. It's more long-term.
Yeah, also on this one, I suspect health might have some issues with it.
I guess just to echo what Fen has just said in terms of, this is about prevention, and obviously having affordable, sustainable housing does impact on health, and certainly prevention of poor health. So I just echo what Fen has said, really, that it's kind of looking at it in a slightly different, with a slightly different lens.
Members, any more questions on this? Because it was something that was quite prominent that we did bring back.
I suppose there's that a lot of the plan really is it's all about prevention, but it doesn't stop us making sure that that we don't miss things by having a positive wish list, for want of a better description. That's all. Thank you.
I'm mindful of the fact that last time we met we were talking about not doing the day job, but the point, in other words, housing is part of the day job along with the other bits, but the bit round housing is obviously the other aspects about healthy lifestyles, all the rest of it you're doing in there, crime prevention, and obviously it's the whole bit about how housing impinges on that, or the lack of a house. So I suspect that's where we were coming from on this particular question. It's a very pertinent one when people feel the strength, lack of housing.
Just to come back on that, and it's a very, very valid point that you make about having positive wishes, and exactly why we took your views back last time on the conversation with colleagues. Although we say this is, we have to think that the plan is around not doing business as usual, but there's inevitable crossovers. There has to be, because when you look at the breadth of services that all the partners in the PSB are subject to, there are inevitable crossovers. Hence why we're making the issues with affordable housing. That's going to be through the strategic housing group, through the local development plan, but it links right across healthy, our priorities on health, our priorities around educations, our priorities around employment. So it has all the connotations around it. And that's why the plan hasn't been like the previous plan, where it's been very specific around, we're going to look to raise educational outcomes. They're all intrinsically linked, and it's difficult sometimes to make that separation. But your point's very well made, Councillor.
So we'll come back to something
It's
else.
only a small point. I just felt that the last time we discussed this, in terms of affordable housing, we felt that the lack of affordable housing impacts on the most vulnerable citizens, and really that impacts on well-being, it impacts on crime rates, social deprivation. Although the detail isn't here now, is something this committee will be keeping an eye on, because we feel the affordable housing impact is the things we deal with daily as councillors, is something that it impacts on the whole well-being of a big cohort of our citizens, is something we'll be watching, I think, is what we'd say.
I just wanted to pick a small point up, because it's absolutely right what the committee is saying. I suppose what you've got here is a collective consideration of an issue that historically perhaps we wouldn't have looked at in terms of a collective. Policing wouldn't have looked at the cost of housing per se. However, the impact now that policing are considering is what is the impact on our communities around homelessness, because that's where policing sort of comes in. So the preventive agenda that we're all working to, based around a common focus on a key issue, I think exercises us to look at how we impact on each other in terms of our services and how that impacts on our communities. So you'll forgive me for saying we'll be interested in your interest in homelessness, because from a policing perspective we have a vested interest in it as well now. We would have had it before, but not in the same way as we have since we've started working around this particular wellbeing plan.
So everybody's exercised that one. Brilliant, thank you. Item number B on here, wellbeing objectives. Can we have someone looking at objective 1 on here, please? The first question. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Chair. Objective 1. As an example, we are trying to understand how we might do things differently as a PSB, given the Council already clears and investigates fly tipping. How might the approach change under the PSB? Who would be involved? How are we going to look at prevention of fly tipping?
This is our specific example.
Hiya. I'll pick up on that one.
Yeah.
So, not just me, I'm sure everybody can have a go at that. Fly tipping would be a good example where we can say we already have powers which relate to trying to prosecute those that fly tip. So NRW has powers when it comes to big fly tipping events, and the local authority has powers. But if we need to use those, we've almost lost the argument. What this is about is, again, prevention, so it's going up the chain. So we already regulate and enforce, and this is us going back up the chain to think, why is this happening in the first place, and how can we work together to stop it happening in the first place? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Go on.
From a fire service perspective, something like 78% of all our fires in Torvine are deliberate, and of those, 56% of those are directly linked to refuse. Okay, so you've got to look at cause and effect. We've got to look at the collection, what happens that way. Why are the reasons that people fly tip? Is it because the charges at our sites are X amount, especially during these difficult financial times? And a radical thought is, have we ever had a look at the cost and effect of how much money does the council bring in through payment for people to tip their waste against the cost of the fire service, NRW, unitary authorities, policing, all to do with this? And what played one off against the other? It's still a public purse. So you may be collecting X amount of money through, as a unitary authority, through people who use the waste sites and pay to tip. But how much money are we using collectively of the public purse to deal with it? And is it a possibility of having free tipping?
Pete first, Lynn next.
Thank you for that comment. I'll park that a minute. We were looking at this as an example of a connected network of natural areas, that objective. And we picked up on fly tipping because the previous day we were in a scrutiny committee looking at the council's budget proposals, and we were looking at the enforcement rate for the council at the moment is something like 4.5%, and we were looking at targets for the future. But looking at fly tipping per se, what I was thinking of here is the local authorities obviously undertaking enforcement action. You've mentioned that Natural Resources Wales have got powers, but fly tipping is an environmental crime, so we were wondering what are the police doing about it, for example. So this is a small example, but it's an example where collaborative working, which I think we're talking about here, could really work. So this would be one where we'd expect, in the detail to follow later, we'd expect perhaps a collaborative approach. Now, the wider issue about the costs of waste, etc. I chair the Cleaner and Greener Committee, and we're looking at our waste issues next week, for example, in scrutiny. And I'm sure now that, in the light of these discussions today, that I'll make sure that issue is considered. I mean, because there are targets from the Welsh Government to increase that. But the issue is fly tipping is growing. There's no question about that. All the evidence shows it. The PSB is supposed to be working together collaboratively. This is an issue where a number of the partners, and fire and rescue, you're dealing with grass fires all the time, and you've just told us that this refuge is one of the reasons that happens. So there's an opportunity, we think, as a committee here for collaborative working on a specific issue that is really having a hurtful impact on our natural areas.
Great. Let's see if we can come on that and then we'll come back up. Yeah.
Obviously, it's close to my heart because being a bit of a local historian, I do a lot of the sites around here and also fly a drone legally around the sites. Check your license. Okay. And I did offer to take anybody out with me any time to show him where the main fly tipping areas are, because normal people or council officers or council people wouldn't know some of these areas where people are going with 4x4s to find them. Now I put the drone up and I see it, and I report back. Before I came on the council, I was doing it regular with another councillor, but now I do it myself. But it's like the lady said up there, it's prevention. Now, as a layman, I could sit down with her and tell her within 10 minutes how we can prevent these fly tipping on a lot of it. It's just, the British site is North Gwent. I'm talking about North now, you're down south obviously. But there's easy things which haven't got to cost a lot of money. Just moving big stones. Get somebody to come and move a big stone, bang, put it in the middle of somewhere to stop the 4x4s going through. And I think to myself, it's like the gentleman said up there, how much it costs. Yeah, what do you charge to go down there? £20 to tip something down a tip? How much it costs to go and pick it up? It's been my argument in council and many committees and scrutiny committees. It's the follow-on price. Yeah, sorry for the council to have £20. What if they're paying £25 to send somebody here to go and pick it up? That's a no-win situation. I think we should really look at the prices we charge to collect stuff and the price they'd charge to pick it up. Surely they've got to be a compromise in the middle and think, right, take stuff down there. You haven't got to start builders' waste down there. Charge the builders, yeah, every time. But the biggest part of the fly tipping I find is builders.
Tyres.
Tyres as well, yeah, but building rubble. Obviously, somebody's paying these people to take their rubbish officially, but they're not putting it on a mountain. I phoned down here, we've got to send somebody out to pick it up. I really think somebody should sit down with a prevention, like the lady said, and I'm prepared to work with anybody in showing places to do it. You haven't got to spend a lot of money, you haven't got to put bollards up, move a couple of stones around. I can show you sites where one stone to stop anybody going through, except motorbikes.
Right. And yourself, you
go first.
You go first, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate a couple of points. I think Fen's spot on in terms of talking about prevention, and I think collaboratively we can definitely start to do that. I mean, part of this is about changing behaviour, and the way that we can do that is engaging with the community and really understand why it's happening, getting the community to take a bit of ownership, a bit of pride. There's all sorts of things we could be doing around this particular issue, and I think we're starting to kind of move in that direction of being able to really tackle it as a collaborative, not individually, where I guess is where it's been challenging. So I just, I think reiterating the points really.
Yeah.
And I think Rachel was, yeah.
I've encountered fly tipping for the last, I don't know how many years in the fire service, and we have worked collectively with the council, the police, the locals, the school, and everything to clean up certain areas. Fly Tipping Action Wales and Keep Wales Tidy all work collectively together to clean up certain areas, make the area respectable again, and give some pride back into the community. And where that's happened, usually around sort of hotspot areas, it's been very, very beneficial. But giving ownership back to the community themselves is essential in this. But looking at specifics, if you've got specific areas where simple actions can be done to prevent that, we'd greatly take that on board. But I know the British site. I've worked in Pontypool from 1989 onwards, and I can remember times when there were probably 20 or 30 cars down in the ravine of the British, just going up over the top. We cleaned that site up. We put boulders there. It's prevented. So, you know, if you do have specific areas that you want to share with us, we will work collectively together to overcome those and reduce fly tipping, but subsequently it also helps NRW because there's no pollution, things of that nature there. Also, it reduces deliberate fire setting. So, you know, it is beneficial for all.
Rachel?
I was just going to add, really, that fly tipping is just one of the threats that our natural resources are facing, and this objective and the action that we're planning to take under it is addressing all of them. So land use pressures, lack of management, climate change, you know, as well as environmental crimes such as fly tipping. We would look at all of those through this objective.
Yeah, the British with the big stones, big rocks. Before I became councillor, I actually went up with Giles, and we went up there and we spotted one rock was missing up there. So Giles reported it. I wasn't on the council then, and the answer he came back, he did show me the reply to it, and it didn't warrant being removed back in. The next week there was a car down over there, so I think Giles proved the point of one stone would have stopped the car going down over, and how much that cost to pick back up. But the other thing is, and this is the main argument I've had for years and years, and it works in other councils, because I've had a look at other councils and the way they do it, is COVID cameras. And it's like, I can't speak for the south, but I can speak for the areas I do, which is Blenavon and Talloway and Abersacan, that if you dump anything on the British, where you obviously know you're up there all the time cleaning up there, there's only 5 places you can put cameras up there, because there's 5 entrances into that area, and I know you've got to catch them in. But if you see a wagon going up full of stuff on the back, you know, signs for cameras, somebody put a drone up, or they put a sign up there. Now, in that, under the British, I don't know whether you was involved, I went across that end of the summer. There's a big sign on the gate there, drones operating in this area. I thought that's brilliant, because that's where most of the fires up around our area is under the British. When the bracken goes down, bang, they set in fire to it. But when that sign was put up, I think you could prove they wasn't another fire up there. Just one sign, you know, saying drones are operating in this area. But I think cameras, COVID cameras, got to be a thing of the future, definitely, and move them around.
The thing with COVID cameras, you've got to comply with RIPA regulations, and that's particularly difficult to overcome.
I just interject in this, because we've done a lot on drones and British. We've got some other projects in Torvine, and I'm going to interject slightly here, because we've got some very small neighbourhood projects, and they're in my ward. I will suggest that they're different to this, because we've got things like the Northfield Group, where Blenavon have worked with Torvine, and the local members, which I'm not particularly myself, have actually done very small, low-scale things. The famous Northfield trolleys, the biggest load of trolleys in the whole of Wales, supermarket trolleys, fly tipping, etc. So you get that small urban Cwmbran type problem. It's a very big problem. It's all over the Free Press. So that's another example of the sort of thing you might need to reflect on as PSB as well. Local partner, and there's, I think, some examples in Cwmbran as well. So it's that type of project as well. And the big stuff, and it is big and very irritating, I just reflect on that, because we get this kind of thing down in urban Cwmbran. small neighbourhood type problems, which drones may not be as appropriate for, but it's a sort of ongoing thing we get down there. So, please.
Before you go?
Yeah. If you want to finish it off.
Yeah.
Because it's good, I agree with it, and what your suggestion's brilliant. No. No, I'm buttering you up there.
Yes, I got it.
Come on, finish
I
it.
come back in, Pete? Yeah.
No.
Like most of us are on Facebook, and I think the biggest problem is the charge down the tip.
Yeah.
Because you get somebody on the saying, "Oh, I refuse to go down the tip now." My daughter said to me, "Come down the tip with me, I'm having problems down there."
Yeah, sure.
Incognito. I said, "Yeah, I'll go down there." First thing I do is shove arrow on it. Didn't even think, went down there. Oh, they've got as gold. Helping Nicola, my daughter, helping her pick the rubbish and put in. And she was telling somebody in the office yesterday, "Oh, my dad came down with me." He said they were very helpful down the tip. Of course they were, because of that.
Yeah.
Because they shouldn't have on it. But
have to be.
You know, I should put it round the garden, just walk on the tip and see what they liked on it. But there is a problem down the tip. And a lot of people are saying it on Facebook. I haven't had a problem down there. But I think the main thing we should look at is the charge down there. Because that is why people are fly tipping. I'm not saying everybody fly tipping, but people have got to pay. They will not pay today. But, you know, we've had a free-piece suite on our street, haven't we? And I say to people, well, tell us who've had a free-piece suite. You're about to see them put it on the car or on the back of a lorry somewhere, but it's just, you know, they won't tell you, will they?
So what you're suggesting is for Pete's committee?
They look at the charges.
You want to come back in on that?
Yeah. I just come in. There's two issues. Rachel, I totally agree with the wider context that you raised a minute ago. We were looking at the wider context, but the fly tipping gave us an opportunity to explore collaborative working. That's the one issue. So we didn't forget the wider picture. But fly tipping is a good example because we've involved virtually 5 of the partnerships in our discussion. That's the first point. The second point is this is being discussed in scrutiny next week, waste collection. So instead of having a recommendation asking Lyndon to take it somewhere, I'll offer as chair of that committee to make sure that the concerns that were raised today are mentioned at committee next week. I know we're discussing waste next week, so it'll be dealt with that way. Thank you. Yeah.
One final thing on that then. I think the things that we already do, the regulation, the enforcement, they're like with fly tipping, the same with the decline in biodiversity, the same with poor air quality. All those things are necessary, what we do, but they're not sufficient because our biodiversity is still declining, because fly tipping is still happening. So what this is about is going a few steps before and looking at what we can do collectively to stop it happening in the first place.
Well, interesting enough, who wants to do the next question? Claire?
What work is being done by each partner to develop the use of renewable energy? And how will we monitor and measure the impact of climate change?
So, it's not just that, it's the whole lot.
So I'm going to start this one off, and then probably Ben will come in then a bit later. So you'll see in the high-level actions that one of the very first things that the PSB is going to do is use Natural Resources Wales' carbon positive methodology to benchmark our carbon footprint. And as part of that, we'll build an understanding of who's doing what around renewables. There has been some benchmarking done in previous years around what renewables we've got in Dilvine, but we need a sort of current up-to-date picture. So I haven't got that at the moment. I know what we're doing as an authority. I know you guys of NRW have mapped theirs. And we know that both the housing associations have been active around renewables as well, but we haven't collectively got that picture, but it's the first sort of thing that we're going to be working on collectively under this objective. So, you got anything to add to that, Fen?
You've just been to the carbon positive training, so you probably know more about that than me. But yeah, that's a really bold and ambitious step, and I'm really pleased that Dilvine PSB are going to pursue that, and we support them. We support them in that where we can, and already are doing that. Actually, we've already started.
So, I will ask a question because I'm chair of allotments, you know, And do you know one of the things that people are doing on allotments? They're using little solar panels rather than generators these days. I mean, that's something that ought to be encouraged. 35 quid from Amazon buys you all sorts of gizmos and the solar panels and things. And it means you're not getting nasty, noisy generators down allotments, which has got to be an improvement. And the implications of that is quite profound, because I think 10 years ago you had to use a generator, and they're dangerous, I think, as well. The quite profound implications about carbon prints, and we've talked about that in the past, haven't we, Rich? It is a lot in that. And the other thing, I went to the Biodiversity Committee the other day, and one of the big indicators, and I said this at Community Council, funnily enough, was it is looking at the butterflies, where they start down the bottom of the valley and then moving up, which is telling me a lot about climate change. That's absolutely staggering. It's quite frightening as well. So I, as a gardener, want to know what's happening.
Yeah. From a fire service.
Sorry, I noticed in the consultation that there were 2 mentions in there of people asking for more electric points charging for electric cars.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting, that people are engaged, and they are involved, and they are interested. So I don't know what we could do about that as a PSB.
Useful one.
I guess again one of the steps that we're going to do is have a look at all our assets as well, and there could be some again quick wins when it comes to our assets and the use of photovoltaics and maybe providing charging points and stuff. So yeah, there definitely are opportunities, and we're committed to looking at them as we move on. I think Derry wanted to.
Just quickly, from a fire service perspective, every light in the fire service premises will be an LED light. So we convert in all of them. We've made a commitment to ensure that 15% of our fleet vehicles will be electric, and also we are actively looking to share our facilities. Not only just here, we've already done it in Abertillery, where with the 3 blue light services are working together under one building. We've also got the police and fire service working together in Abergavenny shortly. We're looking at Monmouth, where the police, fire and ambulance are working together there. We've offered the use of the new fire station when it's built in New Inn to other partners, and hopefully they'll take up that option. And we've recently moved our control and to share it with the police, and also the control from Mid and West Fire and Rescue Service. So Mid and West Fire and Rescue Service Control Centre, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service Control Centre, and the police, South Wales Police Control, are all under one building now. So again, helping towards the carbon agenda.
So it's got some good examples of fire looking at electric fleet, and I know NLW have got some electric vehicle fleet, and the council do as well. So we use electric vehicles to deliver school meals. So you know, straight away when you start sort of putting those examples of good practice together, you can kind of you know, share sort of the rollout going forward, really. There was a second part to your question, wasn't there, around measuring. So I think it was around measuring how well we're adapting to climate change. Yeah, it's something that we're going to have to look at. I mean, we can measure our carbon footprint. So when we've benchmarked how much carbon we're using in Torvine, we can look to put steps in place to reduce it. So we can measure around carbon. Mm-hmm. Adaptation, we really need to explore the risks to service delivery across partners and to our communities, and then look to kind of measure the steps we're putting in place to mitigate those risks. So it's, yeah, I'm not sure there's a definite methodology around it, but
so I guess what I'd say is that we know the risks of climate change. What we're not sure of yet is what the impact is going to be to this community, but we're committed to getting a better understanding of that as we move on.
You mentioned a few things earlier. You mentioned, and I've asked the question, to be honest, because residents have asked me this question. There's certainly Friends of the Earth have asked this question. I will make a declaration, I'm a member of Friends of the Earth. But that's one I need to put down on the list. One of the questions is the hotspots in the valley on that. Some of them are not convinced about that. There's certainly a certain valley that goes down there. But in terms of carbon and air quality. I'm not trying to confuse the two, but the one about alternatives. That's the one thing I was trying to remember. The other was about bicycles and things, and alternative forms of transport, active travel and all that. What progress we're making? I noticed that Cardiff is spending 11 million quid on putting cycleways in Cardiff. I mean, we're not going anywhere near that. We've done active travel. I mean, what are your partners doing in terms of other alternative ways of getting their staff in? Questions like that.
That's a really useful point. The public sector is the second biggest employer in Torvine.
Yeah.
So, there's quite a lot of power for us to work collaboratively and work with our own staff. So, it's complex. There's a lot to look at. We are committed to looking at it as we move on.
The other question that was asked, again, at Cumbrian Community Council, moving the police headquarters, the biggest car parking problem in the borough is going to be down in Lantern Park. We build a new place down there. There's going to be a huge number of cars, if that goes ahead, but when that goes ahead, that's going to be a huge car parking problem. And one question was about, would people down there commit to going to work by other means? Public transport, bike, walking.
I just wanted to come back quickly on that, Chair, not talking about that specifically, but I think in terms of carbon footprint, there's three, for any organisation or indeed anybody, there's three considerations in terms of, in our sense, the police estate, the transport requirement and staff. We do utilise electric vehicles, and we're starting to go up that road, so they are around there. With regards to the estate, obviously we're reviewing that all the time. The headquarters is one element of that, but I think in order to offset some of that parking issue, we are also operating a flexible system in terms of staff deployment. So it's about trying to reduce that footprint in terms of travelling. People coming from Blaenau who have to go to, Newport or whatever. So also the sharing of facilities with other organisations is another way in which we're looking to offset that. So we are conscious, mindful, and starting to be more active around it. I suppose that's the reassurance that we'd offer.
I mean, there was a positive because you had your police out on bicycles, which was actually showing a lot of people the real positives and patrolling on foot. So there is the example out there as well. Want to come back? Yes, no, you're important as well on that one. So it's me on my missions here.
Yeah, well, as you would expect from a public health perspective, active travel is high up on our agenda. I also support the Health Board with their workplace health at work group, and active travel features highly as one of their objectives. What I would say is that there has been some great work within the Health Board to start to move towards active travel, but that there is a culture change probably across all public sectors to make that move to short journeys not being motorised and being active. But just to say that there is already some work underway, but I think collectively, when we start to look at things like infrastructure, change in behaviour, involving the community in some of that is where we'll see the real gains.
Yeah. More on this from members? The only other aspect is when it's a conversion day to electric vehicles, that's the particular day, isn't it? No, there is a government dictate that says our whole country has to go over to electric vehicles. It's about 2050, yeah. Okay, next agenda, item on the agenda. Pete?
The next item we were looking at is Objective 3, the Children and Young People's Agenda. I've got two issues here. One is strategic and one is more specific. If we can deal with the strategic issue first, the Welsh Government has got a children's right measure, which is based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Basically, that means everything they do, they child-proof to make sure it doesn't have an adverse effect on children. Have we thought about, as a PSB, giving consideration to taking a similar approach to that? Yeah. That's the more strategic type question.
We haven't actually picked up the child-proofing that the Welsh Government has been using, but what I will say is that Dermot McChrystal here, Chief Officer for Education, Lead Director for Children and Young People, along with one of Jenny's colleagues, Meryl Bowley from Public Health Wales, have agreed to use the Children and Young People's Improvement Board that we had under ESTIN measures, resurrect that and use that as the lead subgroup to look at Objective 3. So their expertise in child-proofing, looking at all aspects of those things and making the links between Objective 3 but also Objectives 4, 5 and 6 around long-term health of adults as well, looking at the poverty angle, looking at learning skills, etc. They will be looking at all those things and making the links across. So whereas we haven't actually used what you're talking about with Welsh Government, I think that may happen going forward through that subgroup.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good enough for you, Ken.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's a really good answer.
No, that's good. I just want
Anybody else want to answer that?
If I could just add to that, of course, within our unit, we have a Children and Young Persons Participation Officer. That will be linked into the Children and Young People's Improvement Board. So we will have the voice of the child coming into that arena to ensure that we're making up in a similar way that the Children and Young Persons Participation Officer very much involved with the Youth Forum and ensuring that Children and Young People's views have also fed into this plan at some point. But I take your point around making the delivering and the connectivity going forward. Hence why we're very keen to ensure that our officer sits on that board.
That was the more general question. The more specific one is around children with sight loss. Now, I work part-time for a sight loss charity, so I'm particularly interested in this area, although it's not a conflict of interest. Now, there's two things there. The Social Service and Wellbeing Wales Act 2004 and the Codes of Practice, there's some specific recommendations in there around children's habilitation, which is improving mobility. And it's a particular gap in Wales, not just in Torfaen, in Wales, for early years, because children usually get picked up when they go to school and they get a lot of support. But in the early years, it can be a hit and miss. The Code of Practice Part 2, paragraphs 185 to 189, I drafted it. The Codes of Practice, there's a line right at the bottom that says habilitation needs to be delivered. I'm just paraphrasing it, but there's a line that says there needs to be partnership working between the local authority and the local health board. Has that code been taken into account? That's the one question, and what's been done about it? And my second question is, last year, the Welsh Government published a refreshed eye care plan that runs till the end of 2018. And in that plan, there are 10 key priorities. And again, one of the 10 key priorities is, I think it's priority 9, is around children's habilitation. So again, these are statutory requirements coming down from the Welsh Government. What is the PSB doing to make sure that these things are met?
It's funny coming in here from the fire service in relation to this, but I don't believe this sits with the PSB. I believe this sits with the health service area plan, not with ourselves.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, particularly the codes of practice talk about partnership working. I see a linkage there between, if there's partnership working in a code of practice, the PSB is all about code of practice and sorting out children with disabilities at a very young age is enable them to achieve their potential, and it has a massive impact on well-being. And if we can sort out problems with disabilities early, it's going to have a major impact on a lot of services a lot of you guys deliver longer term. So I certainly think it does fit with the well-being agenda, and I also think it sits with the PSB agenda, and that's why I've raised those issues.
Well, personally, personally, I believe that as a collective, we work together collaboratively to try and achieve common goals. But then within each organisation, there are going to be specifics that will be down to that particular area. Even though we would support from a PSP, the actual specifics of dealing with that will be down to, for example, health in that in that area. So, which is why I say that would come under the area plan for the health service, not necessarily coming from the PSP.
I think they're under the area plan and the Social Services Wellbeing Act. There is a subgroup that will be specifically looking at children, and I would suggest that I'm sure Dermot and Mez would already have made those connections, but I will make sure that the PSB subgroup, children and young people I just said about for Objective 3, make sure that they're linked in to the subgroup for children and developments there within the Social Services Area Plan, and that there's partnership in both of those elements, I suppose. And I can understand that Dowie's saying it's particular probably around social care and health and the local authority partnership rather than the wider organisations, but we'll make sure that those connections are made for you.
And that's all I'm looking for, really.
Thank you. So you're going to make sure that Peter's detail... Yeah?
I think I would just echo that, really. I think that's probably about service provision and picking those children up earlier in their lifetime. I guess this is the prevention bit. So although there is probably an overlap in terms of the partners that we're talking about, I think it's probably just ensuring that that is within the area plan. And
That's at consultation at the moment, isn't it? So you can have a look at that if you want. I think it's online, isn't it? Yeah. So there's no point in duplicating. I think we're trying to make sure that we do different aspects.
The health and well-being agenda, but there is a more sort of general thing around the kind of general issues around childhood, isn't there? Like obesity, lifestyle, which is your remit.
Which is why we'll make those connections.
Yeah, no, and I think, okay, that's Peter was honing from that to that. So you will make those connections, so we've got that. We obviously...
No, I mean, all I'm trying to do here is ensure those connections are made. And and I take what Dewey was saying, and obviously some of these areas won't impact greatly on the fire service, but I was particularly interested in that one because it does talk from a Welsh Government perspective about partnership working, and I don't want to repeat what I said a minute ago, but partnership working and prevention, it's a big part of the PSP agenda, and we need to ensure that those links are made and thought about. And actually, I did raise this with Dermot at the scrutiny meeting the other day on resources. So, but I'd be grateful if you would raise it.
Thanks for that, Peter. Can somebody bring...
I'd just like to offer a collective reassurance, I think, because both individually and collectively, we're well versed in our duties against equality and disablement, etc., and enablement. So I think it's part of our psyche in terms of how we operate anyway. So we would be looking at... I know you're looking for specifics to get it into the programme, but on a day-to-day basis, we have to consider these issues anyway.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But if we go back to the Social Service and Health Act, and when the populations assessments were done, they were. I mean, I read every one in Wales actually. There were gaps, and one of the gaps was the disability sector on some of them. They were at different levels. But I know we all try to cover everything, and it's not easy. But we pick up on things that we've got knowledge and expertise about.
I'm mindful of the fact we need to move on here. Can you do Objective 4, please, Liz?
We're sticking on health.
Okay. Sorry.
Can you explain the progress made to date with the Healthy Behaviours project in Blenavon, and what is the timeline for taking this project forward? And the second part of the question, we understand Welsh Government are supporting this pilot, but how will we ensure each partner organisation effectively resources future projects?
Okay, so I'm just trying to remember the first question. Yeah, we haven't actually started working on the pilot yet. So there is no progress to date. So we're sort of currently at the tender stage, which Welsh Government are handling. So we'll be able to update you, in subsequent months as the project goes along. And the second question was broader than that, around resources. Do you want to pick that one up, Lyndon?
Part of the rationale around going for the pilot in Blanavon is to start to get the PSB working differently and more collectively and collaboratively, in both in terms of how the pilot goes, what positives do we get out of it, but in the longer term, and I think this was it's just a personal view of mine, and I think this was an opportunity missed when the legislation was passed around the general resourcing of Public Service Board activity. Although we've got a Public Service Board that's got statutory members that sit on the board, there isn't a statutory requirement to share a budget or share a resource. And I think that was an opportunity missed, and that's just my own personal view of that. I'm not political on it, it's just a view that I have. It's about a proof of concept in Blanavon. If it works well, it's a proven activity that will give some reassurance across the PSB to support the other activities that we want to take forward across the wellbeing plan. We are having much more significant conversations in PSB about sharing resources and taking things forward, and we are all within a budget balloon envelope of ever-decreasing budgets with more demands and more targets set for us. So I think in terms of the future, there is a willingness on the PSB to operate differently. They are very supportive of the pilot. I think it'll be interesting to see what outcomes come out of the pilot. But we do have to have those conversations around, yes, the local authority has the administrative duty around the PSB. It hasn't got the responsibility to finance and drive everything. That is part of the wider partnership that we've had the discussion at the PSB level. So in terms of future resourcing, that they are very difficult and complicated subjects to be talking through. But unless we have those conversations and agree a way forward and agree what the budget could look like and what the contributions are, then we won't be able to progress. And hence why I think the opportunity was missed not to include that within the original legislation.
Yeah, go on.
Just to add to that, particularly in terms of the influence in healthy behaviours, I was part of the team that wrote the Gwent Childhood Obesity Strategy, and within there are actions that would require some financial resource. But there are also a lot of actions in there that actually don't cost anything. They're about doing things differently, and that's probably the same across all the healthy behaviours if you're looking at making a change there, and probably across some of the wider issues that the PSB would be looking at as well. So I think it's about being able to distill, and probably goes along with the low-hanging fruit, what are the things that we can do early doors and also with limited resource, and then maybe look at how we finance some of those more expensive sort of longer term ambitions, I guess.
Off that one. Yeah.
The phrase that we keep hearing the Commissioner uses around repurposing resources, so that's one that we're keeping in our minds as we go forward.
So the Commission has a particular, it certainly has a particular view, does it?
Yeah, so it's using the resources that you already have in the system, so that you can maximise wellbeing benefits. So, accepting that there's no tree with extra money on that we can all access. We have to kind of look how we use what we've got in the best way.
When we framed that particular question, I think we were the fact that you were borrowing our community council clerks for certain meetings, and the issue was that they were coming along to certain meetings and everybody doesn't have resources, or does the odd bit of resource, like the odd minutes or the odd bit of publicity. So yeah, I'll take the point, but at the end of the day, it's obviously people's salaries, it's people's ability to do publicity. I take the point about what you can get a quick gain out, things like obesity strategies and things like that. But sooner or later, you're going to want to do something serious. So the only obvious place is the WAG, isn't it? Or Welsh Government, yeah. And so, or the Commissioner. So it does make you wonder where grants or things like that are going to come from, because we've just done a budget, haven't we? And most other people are in the same boat. So if they want serious pieces of work done, they've got to look like you are for projects, or we go somewhere else. I don't know what's the general view amongst yourselves. You obviously must have given this some thought.
Constantly. Being a service head, but budgets are quite critical with everything we do. Just in terms of the wider partnership, and Jen made a very important point that I missed there. There are opportunities out there that can be done for free or very low cost, and I think that's taken as a given across the PSB that we would consider that. For projects that will require resourcing to push forward, that is a discussion at the PSB executive and group to be identifying once we've done once the plan is agreed, there's an exercise in what are we going to prioritise within the plan that needs to be done first. That's inevitable, because we cannot do everything that's in the plan, because that's impossible to do. So we have to. It's not impossible to do. We can do it. It will take time. So it's about prioritising what needs to be done, and it's the discussion at the PSB executive level then between the chief executives, the chief officers, and so on. How are we going to progress this? If we're going to progress this, how can we resource it? Are there any resources from Welsh Government, or what do we need to look to? And I'm going to use Rachel's word here because I like it. Repurpose the existing resources within our organisation. So there is a question mark over resourcing, and because that resourcing then will provide the commitments for going forward. Hence my previous personal comment on if that had been included in the legislation, then budgets will drive progress and so on. So I don't know what I can add any further to that, Councillor, at this point.
Just from early days, Dewi, OSG, I remember you giving an example of the fire service and how you repurposed resources within the fire service to focus on prevention. And that's, there's learning that we can have between organisations on that. So not additional, but just look at what you do and where you're putting your resources. Are you putting them in the right place? So we know that there are good examples of how to do it well, and we'll be exploring them as a collective.
You very interestingly used the word collective, which is nice. I kind of hear the word stakeholder and buy-in, don't I? Do I? And then you use members of your staff, like I suspect Ree Bennett and the Youth Council, and that's quite nice actually, because you're getting stakeholders out there, and some of the stuff you can do is quite gentle level, useful level, which can be well used. Things like that I think are quite interesting.
They're all resources.
They are, aren't they?
They're all, our staff, our assets, community. They're all resources, and Fen just made a very interesting point in exactly that. We do have to be a little bit cleverer around how we distribute those resources, but we're all operating within a very finite bubble, and you have to. That is reality, The local authorities under pressure, the fire service under pressure, and RW is. We all are as public bodies. This is a statutory plan.
Yeah.
It's one of the Welsh Government's priorities. We've got a Future Generations Commission that's overseeing it. We've identified what our draft priorities are, and we're seeking approval of those. The next stage is how we're going to take that forward, and resourcing will be a very critical discussion around that. But we also have to be very mindful of what are the current pressures as well, because you can't look at this in rose-coloured spectacles. You have to look back to the reality of how are we going to deliver this, how can we deliver it, and what contributions are going to be.
You've used another word there, statutory. It has to be done.
It's a statutory plan.
Yeah.
How we deliver it will be in relation to how we can actively take it forward.
Okay, thank you. No, that's okay. Questions, members? No. Next question, which I think is Liz now.
Thank you. This is about objective number 5. There's numerous pieces of work being taken forward by the council and housing associations regarding financial inclusion. How is this work being coordinated? And the second part really is there a scope for a one-stop shop where we pool resources to support residents in financial difficulty?
Me again, Councillor. No, it's okay. Local authority has anti-poverty champion, which is Councillor David Daniels, and himself and David Congreve lead a welfare reform project group, and we've had that group working for several years now. It was tackling anti-poverty, then when welfare reform came out we slightly changed focus, and that group will continue to bring in partners and work together. At the moment we've been quite focused, as you say, with RSLs and the council and some other partners around financial inclusion. They have got a slightly wider agenda of trying to, some of the prevention work we've talked earlier about trying to get to people before they fall into the trap of poverty. What can we do to, but you know, we are up against national reforms as well and policy there that we can't actually change that policy. What we can do is try and mitigate against it. So what we've put really in this objective is some work for that group to continue meeting, make some wider connections into the work of business, apprentices, learning, and other aspects of sort of tackling and making economic resilience, because it's not just about tackling that other bit, it's about getting jobs and other jobs of a salary and of the hours that will suit people, and childcare and all those different issues that go with it, that has been part of that group's agenda, but it doesn't get stuck, but there's only so far we've been able to go, and I think they will continue looking at that. The bit about the one-stop shop, I don't know if they have come across that before. We try to use some of our third sector organisations. We find members of the public are more likely to go and talk to somebody than to come into perhaps the council to say they can't pay their council tax or they're defaulting on their rent. They won't necessarily go to their landlord, they will go to another party. And if you made a one-stop shop, how easy would that be for people across the borough to access and get into? People go into all sorts of ways. But what we do have are partners sharing each other's premises. So in the food banks, for example, we have people there for rent, we have people there for domestic violence, we have there with people for CAB, Citizens Advice, giving advice at those points, if that's the place that people feel most comfortable in going into. So we have wanted to cut off anything, but that's not to say that a one-stop shop couldn't be considered as something, and see what those people feel about that. And going back to some of those customers, how would those customers feel if there was one place to go? What we've tried to do is make people available in several points across the borough that gives a multi-agency sort of approach to people.
I think perhaps that can sometimes cause confusion if there was one place that everybody knew could get all of the information they required. Maybe that would take out some of the confusion, because at the moment it's accessing different things in different places, and it can get confusing to me, and I'm in, then you know, Joe Blogs on the street is without being signposted. It's the original point of signpost that is and maybe the one-stop shop is the signposting mechanism, maybe, perhaps.
Just to say that the neighbourhood care networks in Torfaen and across Gwent are actually looking at developing integrated wellness networks. And one of the so it's about how we coordinate wellbeing services. One of the quadrants is around financial services and all the providers that are in Torfaen that are assisting people, and how we bring them together and coordinate. So it may not be a physical one-stop shop, but there are connecting roles within the integrated wellness network that will enable people to navigate those services or be signposted to those services. So it's still early days, but it is part of how they're changing the delivery of primary care. But we'll also need the input and support of all the wider partners as well through collaboration through PSP.
Yeah, Peter?
I mean, when we were looking at this, we were particularly interested in this issue of pooling resources because we had the leader at the last scrutiny meeting, and there wasn't much evidence coming forth that we've reached the stage yet where we're actually going to share budgets. And we felt this was a good example. I mean, as councillors, we'll get people in housing arrears, say with a social landlord. They'll then come to us because they're not getting far with the social landlord. We'll then perhaps refer them on to the financial inclusion team here in the council. And that was the one-stop shop concept, that maybe we could pull that together better than it is now, because as Liz just said, it's confusing for us and it's certainly confusing for the residents who are in there. But really, the partnership working, and how do we break down, how do we get to the point where actually there is something we can not only do together collaboratively, but we can pay for together? Because we haven't seen much evidence of that yet. And do we think that as these plans develop, there'll be more of that happening?
Yeah.
So the last PSB, we were talking about perhaps the need to train our staff on well-being, because we speak at OSG about at one time in the future we will all be well-being officers. When people interact with services already now, they don't see what badge you've got and get confused when they get passed from pillar to post. And what we need to move to is for all staff to realise that it's not just us, the people around this table. Wellbeing is about everybody. It's about the community, and it's about the officers that provide the services. So we have spoken. We spoke at the PSB about training for staff so that they can do that signposting more, and they can take on board the implications of the difficulty that the service user has and the impacts on wellbeing. So one day we'll be wellbeing officers.
I'm back on that.
I think maybe that with this this document being more about your prevention, then getting in early with a hub of some sort that signposts everyone everywhere is the prevention that's needed to stop people maybe going weeks and months down the line with rent arrears or difficulty feeding their children. If there is one single point of contact that is so well advertised that everybody knows about it, you are hitting your prevention way before the issue happens, and I think maybe that's the
Yeah, go on.
Just to add, in terms of the integrated wellness networks, they are looking at primary care resource hubs.
Yes.
The name's probably a bit distracting because actually what they're talking about is a wellbeing hub. So they'd be made up of financial services, education, learning services, mental health and wellbeing, and then your kind of health behaviour, healthy lifestyle services. And they're talking about hubs where maybe you can't fit all of them in because that would be a large number of services, but at least being a place,
You're hitting something that I was getting concerned about, because there's been some really interesting experimentation, certainly in London and places like that, where they've actually, the primary caregiver has had further education, health, finance or inclusion in what we used to call doctor's surgeries, and it's the obvious place to put it. You've got all that resource, you might as well put the rest of it in there. And police stations, wasn't it? In one place, it made a lot of sense. It's a huge resource, put a policeman in there as well. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Someplace in London, wasn't it? I can't remember.
I think it's worthy of note, really, that it's not just Torvine that's exercising this particular issue. Regional Collaboration Committee, of which we're a member, have particular commentary around the flexible funding pilot that's going forward because of the way that funding is going to impact on front-end service position in terms of their homelessness agenda. They talk quite heavily around the universal credit issue and how that's going to impact. So indeed, informing people of, how to avoid that is interesting. But in other local authority areas, they are also examining, the demise of Communities First, which was a provision of some of that information and some of the funding issues that third sector providers are having challenges with at the moment. So there is definitely a wicked issue here that we'll have to consider. The options of shared premises, I think Dewey and I we've talked about that ad nauseum perhaps today, but we're already going up that road of shared premises for police stations. The programme that you talk about in London, a delegation, if that's the right word, from a neighbouring authority just went there to look at best practice. So people in Gwent are exercising the sort of thought process on all of this, because it is something that's coming at us at the speed of light, isn't it?
I mean, my colleague here is looking at libraries again, and the library in Cwmbran has already had a wellness thing in there as well. So, I mean, it does make, and you had the wellness in it, and we've got the council hub in the library now, police station in there. Maybe I don't know, but it's obvious that facility. It makes an obvious one, doesn't it?
The precedent is set, Chair. I mean, we've had police presence in Caerphilly Library. Yeah. We've had police presence in the Memo in Newbridge. I think the beauty of the London programme that was visited recently was it grew from the community by empowering them, supporting them, and something then that was a nucleus around health has grown into something that is really, really impactful in that community. So, we can do that. We've done that. We can do it.
Okay, any more? Good. I'll do the next one, shall I? Gwyn, you've already had a go, haven't you? One. Yeah, no, I thought you had gone drones. Fly tipping nets. So it's my go this time. Okay, objective 6. How can we ensure that big projects, e.g. Cardiff City Regional Deal, the Valleys Task Force and perhaps Tidal Lagoon proposals are supported by a variety of employment and training opportunities for local people of all ages? That's one part of it. The other part is, will this area of work test the partnership as individual public bodies may take time and resources, skilling people who then go on to gain long-term employment in other organisations? You've got that one? Yes. Yeah. Next to this, there's the big projects, and then the area of work test the partnership of individual public bodies, take time for skilling people who then go on and work for somebody else. Yeah.
I'll give it a go. Yes, obviously, in relation to the wellbeing assessments across Gwent, they're very conscious of the fact that there's a major Cardiff City region project going on where, and Rachel's made a point to me very early on, is don't forget the Tidal Lagoon in Swansea as well as being a part of this process. So we're very mindful of these big projects that's going on, and they will impact on us at different levels, because of course depends upon the region where those facilities are going to lie. What we try to do in the wellbeing plan, certainly within the narrative, is to make some of the connections across some of the stuff that we're doing. We've got employment in poverty, employment, resourcing, those elements within our plan. The impact on what the Cardiff City region will do in our area, we don't know what that's going to be. So not knowing what those impacts are going to be, we have to continue with our local plan developments. But we're also, and for the committees general, we're also part of a much wider Gwent Strategic Wellbeing Assessment Group that's looking at priorities across Gwent, and again trying to look at where the synergies are across Gwent, and there's a number of people here who are members of that Gwent Strategic Group as well. What impact it will have, I don't know yet. Our local assessments are fed into the Gwent assessments and the City Region Deal
and so on is another part of it. All I can say at the moment is this is the wellbeing assessment for Torfaen that's making those connections across. What we're very keen to do, both across Gwent and within here, we don't want to duplicate things. If it's being done somewhere else, then we don't need to do it here. We've also talked at the Gwent level around if there's common priorities at the Gwent level, can we look at those things moving forward as how can we better take those forward as part of a region rather than a locality, and trying to make the connections across there. So we are making the connections. I'm presuming your question is around making those connections across. But these are very early days for us, and the plan does recognise those connections. It's how things pan out. It will be another matter for us to consider.
I'll add to that, Councillor. I went and met with Rachel Jowett recently and her management team, because she was quite keen to make sure that what's happening, you know, people who are working on economic development, the people who are working on regeneration, etc. Karen Padfield has now moved into her area around skills and learning, etc. That they're making the connections with the Valleys Task Force in particular, but we did touch on Cardiff City Region as well. And I think some of those people around that table will be part of the subgroup leading on this objective for the PSB, and then pulling in partners elsewhere. We know that some of our partners in higher education, further education, some of our statutory partners here who can do what around apprentices, and it is all looking, I think, to see what opportunities are there around people getting work elsewhere along the M4 corridor. Some of these big strategic things. We'll have the new hospital coming in to Llanfechford Grange and the Science Park, you know, and making sure that we are sort of getting people to have the aspirations to take up job opportunities wherever they fall, that they will have the ability to access those places transport-wise and able to sort of get to those as well. I think we perhaps have to be a bit more relaxed about we train up people and then they go and get a job elsewhere. You know, that is a big... I hate it on one foot when I lose somebody, which we did last week. On the other hand, I was really pleased for the person because he was going for promotion somewhere, and there was a bit of a, haven't we done well to get him to that point? So, and I think, you know, people... I think around the table we are fairly relaxed on that. But, just to reassure you, you know, when the subgroup comes, we are making sure that the right people are connecting to these groups so that we can make the connections to these projects.
Yeah, just carrying on from what Sue said, you know, as an employer in the area, fire stations are located. Many of the fire stations in this area are retained, so subsequently they can only employ local people who live within 5 minutes of the fire station because of the need to respond. In addition to that, in each unit, in our unit authority, we have a young fire cadets scheme whereby we train individuals from the age of 13 through to 18 and provide them with skill sets which allow them to use those to gain employment, but also we're looking further afield to see that there's a potential for a direct link then utilising those individuals into the fire service. And in addition to that, we're also looking at a volunteering scheme where individuals can volunteer to work within the fire service, do X amount for us, and subsequently they will get exposed to certain skill levels, they will get CVs, and that will then enable them to have additional skill sets which become more employable, particularly those individuals in the local community, and help them with employment that way.
NRW will be launching an apprenticeship scheme in 2018, so people will be able to gain skills in environment management.
Bit of you is that all three sections of you?
It's a national. We service 19 PSBs across Wales, so that is a national scheme.
Police?
We have a new approach about citizens in policing, which starts at 9 with a continuum up to police officer level if you so want it. There's a strategy being drawn up at the moment to ensure that is an incremental process. should an individual want it. But there's any number of opportunities, of course, and if you want to sign up, I've got the forms for special constabulary. But you've got a very active, for example, crime prevention panel in Torvine now that's up and coming. So there's opportunities like that where people build their CV with skill sets that allow them to then get employment either with us or with anybody else. And obviously we're recruiting police officers at the moment. So.
Thank you, everybody, for that, because we've actually got an example of the public services. Actually, one thing we were talking, train up a hell of a lot of people, and that second bit is they go on to provide people for a lot of people, and that is what the public services have always done. Peter, do you want to add something?
No.
We had conversed on that, didn't we? So any other stuff before we move on? I'm mindful of the fact that we've actually got to get on with some other stuff on this. Right, objective 7, you want to do that one, do you? Yeah.
Sorry, did you want? No, sorry. On this one, which is create safer, competent communities and promote community cohesion, we've already touched on the safer community angle in the earlier discussion. I was particularly interested in the community cohesion bit of this, and there's two issues. During the consultation response, did we get any response from our BME people in the area, or other groups that represent minority groups? That's one specific. And then I worry that, if we take the prevent agenda or we take the increase over the last few years in hate crime, is there enough in this plan around that? And on page 80 of the plan, under collaboration, I wondered, taking account of what I've just said about hate crime, the prevent agenda, why aren't the police and the local authority featuring in delivering the objective? Because it just seemed a little bit of a mismatch.
Okay.
Yeah, no, go. Yes.
Yeah. So I was just going to answer your last part of your question first. They do now. So when we issued the version to scrutiny, it was still a work in progress. So yeah, we've added that detail now. There at the top. yes, just to reassure you.
I will come in on the first part about people who responded to our consultation. We didn't have any specific people who came back from BME community, but we have, over the last 2 years, as I said earlier on, gone out to our different communities. Chris Hunt, our regional community cohesion officer, made sure that the draft plan went out to all the various groups around the borough that he's in touch with, whether that be on a religious or faith basis, whether that's on a population basis or some of the other communities, hard to reach as we call them. They had the opportunity, I suppose, to respond as well. And the easy read, I think that we took up your suggestion last time. We did have some people come back and said actually that it was quite helpful to read that and to make some comment and to share it with our service users, maybe in some of the groups, although we didn't necessarily have a formal response back from them. They've had a copy and had access to it. We did have some letters from Friends of the Earth, Arts Council, Oxfam, and those responses were, I suppose, concerned. One response was concerned about women in poverty, and taking a particular bit, so that will get fed into that welfare reform group, as I say, and looking at Objective 5. We had some others that were concerned about natural areas and resources and different aspects, so those responses will get fed out to the different people across, but yeah, people did have the opportunity to respond.
I just come back then. Yeah, I'm very grateful for your comments on the consultation. I'm really pleased that bits have been added in that we picked up. I just wondered generally, is there enough in the plan around the community cohesion? Perhaps, do you think there is?
First of all, these guys are chasing us down all the time. We've added quite significantly into that, haven't you? Into that, so hopefully you'll be colleagues. So you will see an improvement in what you saw last time in terms of the cohesion element. From our perspective, community cohesion is priority 3 for the Police and Crime Commissioner. So police are looking at it as a key requirement in terms of all of their work. Our discussion at PSB will be now, what are the other partners bringing to the table in terms of cohesive communities? Ultimately, it's about empowering and engaging with our communities to empower them to be able to do some stuff for themselves, because public services can't be expected to do it all the time. And, you know, we won't even talk about the dependent society, because we don't need to go into that. But I think there's a call now to engage with our communities, to have honest conversations with them, to allow them to come up with some of the answers that they are better informed than we are, quite frankly. I'm talking about me, not you. Don't take it personal. But it's about then, very much like the London programme, to give them the support, the direction and the assistance to be able to grow some of their own stuff, which some communities, most communities, want to do anyway. That's about cohesion. There are any number of individual projects, the things around prevent, hate crime, contest, all of this. They are things that are constantly on our radar. I don't know if they would be constantly on all of our partners' radar, but the challenge to the PSB is, well, what is your part to play going forward? But we're all asking that of each other. So, from my point of view, it's a key priority for policing across Gwent, as laid out in the Police and Crime Plan. They have 50 quid each. Want to buy one off me? Wrong forum. So there is that reassurance that if that is the fundamental for community cohesion from a security, community safety angle, everybody else will buy into that.
Are you all buying into it?
Absolutely. I think from our perspective as a recommendation, we'd welcome seeing the strengthening of the cohesion element of the plan.
That's good.
I totally agree with that, and I would welcome any support and observations that local councillors have, because you are in the hearts of your community, so any sort of linkages or discussions around that. In terms of, you want to see the plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, 50 quid.
So you've been selling that to us. Sorry, we're going to have that one as a recommendation.
Yeah, Chair, that was helpful, I think. A helpful discussion, thank you.
Yeah.
He'll tell you afterwards. Okay. C, future monitoring and wellbeing plan. There's about 4 questions here. I'm going to do them one at a time, so you sort of relax a bit on this one. Okay. Following the sign-off of the plan, where does the PSB go next? What's the plan for 2018-19?
The plan now is going to Cabinet next week to request approval to take it to Council at the end of this month. So once Council has agreed the plan, or not, whatever Council decides to do, the other partners then have to sign off their plan, and that's going to vary between February and March, depending upon when the corporate statutory bodies meet. So in health will meet. Once that's concluded, we then move into the delivery phase and started to work through then what are we going to do within the priorities. Some of the conversations some of the issues I raised earlier around how are we going to prioritise, how are we going to take that forward. So that's the timetable moving forward as we progress.
Anybody else?
My board, I sat with scrutiny with my board at NRW as well. And just a bit of feedback, they've read 19 plans and Torvine is at the top of the pile. So, there you go.
Have they read it or they're going about to read it?
No, they've been through the plan at length and they've been through everybody's plans. So, and they were really pleased with the enthusiasm and the effort that's gone into the Torvine plan.
Lovely. So next question down here is, what will we be reporting on in October 2019 and how will we know that we've been successful?
Well, again, that's going to depend how we take forward the delivery. I did mention earlier that it's got to be quite a lot of thinking towards this, and the Future Generations Commissioner, who is expecting a lot from PSBs, has already acknowledged that that there's substantial planning to go forward. We've got lots of work to do around the officer support group level. We've got the coordination across the PSB, some of the Gwent work that we're doing. So we can report where we are as we progress going forward. So I think the Commissioner has made an expression on all PSBs where there's don't want to see us jumping in feet first and just to say that we're doing something. It's around longer term planning, how that gets discharged into delivery plans, and report. It'll probably be report in progress.
Thank you. Anybody else on that one? No, okay. I look forward to that. Will you be bringing her up here to have a talk to us as well?
I'm sure if I got in touch with Sophie's office and you wanted Sophie to come to scrutiny, because she did go to Monmouthshire's scrutiny panel, I'm sure that I would ask. And she's always been very approachable because she wants the best out of this process as well as everybody else does.
Some future date, that might be quite useful, I guess.
We did make an offer to the Future Generations Commissioner to come to this meeting today. They may be observing on the webcast, as are the Wales Audit Office. But they did say that the appearance of Sophie at the Monmouthshire meeting was slightly different. She was there to talk about her role in the scrutiny, not actually the scrutinising of the plan. So you just need to be clear as to what we're asking if we're issuing an invitation, what that is about.
Peter should make an observation.
I was wondering, Chair, would a better vehicle be a all members seminar on the Future Generations Act with the actual chair, rather than scrutinising the detail of a plan, which is then scrutinised by the Future Generations Commissioner?
Might be a very useful. Thank you. It's a very good suggestion. Members, who'd like that one? Yeah, thank you. Next question. We only got this is your penultimate question here. How will the PSB know the extent at which your actions have been delivered? How much progress how much progress is being made towards each objective? Nice little question, isn't it?
I'll take that one, Chair, as best as I can. It's pretty much linked to the previous two questions, really. And I don't want to repeat myself really for the committee. We are looking at a performance framework that we need to take forward. We are not going to go down the record card process that we did with the local service board. We're going to look at other delivery mechanisms with that. Sue's already mentioned that because we've got 7 objectives, we'll be looking for 7 leads and 7 subgroups. So we will be reporting around those parameters on progress. How do we know if we're successful? Well, we've got short, medium and longer term goals that will be set within each of those delivery plans, and we'll be reporting against those as things progress.
Any more?
I think in scrutiny, I think Sophie mentioned that they were looking at indicators with Cardiff University, so some stuff might come out on that in the next sort of 12 months or so that will be relevant to this process. I think specifically around the ways of working.
Thank you.
If I could, Chair, just 2 points really. There's been a recent event down at Cardiff run by Wales Audit Office looking specifically around scrutiny and how that might look in terms of future governance monitoring. I think that was a really informative event, and we will be getting feedback from that in due course in terms of some observations made. I don't know if Torvine were represented, but
me and him. I was talking to Sophie, funnily enough.
Right. Well, hopefully you agree that it was a useful event, because I thought some of the discussions in the workshops was really useful. I did. Low profile. But the other point for us as a collective, in terms of how will we know whether we are doing what we're doing to the satisfaction of our community, is a piece of work that's going on around the Happy Cities Happiness Pulse. Now, I think that's based upon 60 indicators in terms of what our community is saying about what we're doing. If that doesn't become a key indicator set for every public service board, I think we'll be doing ourselves down, because it's a direct tap to our communities about how they feel about what's going on. I think that would be key.
I think what you're suggesting there is a very good idea indeed. Thank you. And any ideas that came out of that, I thought that's just a really good idea there. Thank you. Any other ones like that? Because it's back to what we suggested before, where you put the graphics in and stuff like that. It's simple stuff. Thank you. Then, right, the end question now. I hope it's one that's not been repeated. Is, do we need a single-year delivery plan to support ownership and accountability of the wellbeing plan?
I think it's much longer than a year. You know, I think we would be putting ourselves in a pretty much difficult situation if we say that we're going to be reporting on this, particularly as we've been at length to advise it. You know, we've got to do some serious planning and organisation over the next period. Now, we are setting up the relevant leads for each of the objectives. They will be working through the document and identifying the areas that they are going to be working on. So we will be able to map that out. But in terms of a year delivery plan, I think we'd be setting ourselves up to fail, and we'll be coming back to scrutiny saying, I'm sorry, we haven't done anything on this, because we've been planning. And I don't think that's acceptable to you as a committee, really.
No, it's okay. Right, members, would you like to say something before we end? This is the last question. You're happy about what you said? Okay. No, brilliant. No, thank you very much for your contributions. Right, everybody that's here, would you all like to say a little something before we finish, before I quickly sum up?
I'd just like to say, as the lead officer really for the council on this, and of course all my colleagues on the partnership, it's been a really useful experience for me personally to do scrutiny, and it's been great to have such solid engagement around and scrutiny of what is a very wide-ranging plan. It feels sometimes as if we are gathering smoke into the arena, because we are talking generations ahead. But I personally feel we've had a very constructive discussion, and I hope you feel from your previous scrutiny comments that we took your views on board and we fed that into the plans going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you, members, for participating, and thank you, officers, for being very patient and taking information. And, thank you very much indeed. Everybody's participated splendidly, and I'm sure Peter, did you want? Yeah.
I'm really pleased that you took on the easy read version. I'm grateful that you listened to the committee. No, and I'm pleased you said it did help. And I do feel that I'm fairly new to this committee. I do feel these discussions are very constructive, and I do feel we are listened to.
Good, thank you. Take his views, because he likes to have a laugh. You can tell he's ex-civil servant, can't you? And I'd like to say thank you, everybody. It's been a fully bit, and the bit about that last week, the thing down in Cardiff was helpful. And low-hanging fruit, a list of low-hanging fruit. That's got to be the expression this afternoon. Apples, pears, or anyway. You're all looking like you would need to go home and have a nice cup of tea or something. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for coming. For 10 minutes of recommendation. That's all right. Remember, we're on webcast, please, so decorum us. Pete, thank you. Right, do you want to hear what Tom's noted down, or would you like any burning recommendations here?
No. I thought it was a good meeting, very constructive. I don't think we've come up with a huge amount of recommendations, Tom. I mean, this was a follow-up from a previous meeting. They dealt with a lot of the issues we raised. That's why I said thank you at the end, learn it, not just the easy read, but, and I felt the things that we did recommend, I think they will proactively try and deal with. But Tom will go.
Let's see if we can get 5%.
No, I think less maybe more on this one. Going from the back, I think there was a feeling that we needed to strengthen the partnership approach to community safety.
The community cohesion.
Community cohesion.
That element of it.
That came out well. That's a major one.
You'll probably have the better language here, but it was we seem to be recommending that Sue went to speak with Dermot and colleagues. I wasn't exactly sure what you were getting at, but you wanted assurances that they were giving. Was it partially sighted?
Children with
disabilities.
Yeah, it was a specific thing around children with disabilities, but particularly children with sight loss. That they were following the guidance issued by the Welsh Government around the Social Services Act and the Refresh Eye Care Plan. I can give you a formal words for that, Tom.
Yeah.
You were actually, it was the wider thing about the guidances, wasn't it, in the partnership working? I got that.
No, the first bit was the children's right measure, and I don't think the recommendation came out of that because they gave reassurances that they are dealing with that.
The specialist one then.
So the only recommendation there was around the specialism.
Yeah.
I did the more specific, the strategic question around the right to the child measure. I thought they adequately dealt with that. But the specific one, particularly there was and this doesn't go in the recommendation, but there was on the guidance note, and I even gave them the paragraphs of the guidance note. There's a line about this should be delivered in partnership between the local health board and the local authorities. So I do think we ought to say something around that. And I think probably the answer will come back. It'll be a specific in the area plan, but that doesn't stop us making the recommendation. So I will give you a little formal words for that.
That'll be helpful
tonight. So you've got that, and that can be shared with us before it goes any further.
Okay, what's the next one, Tom?
I think the only other sort of recommendation, and it kind of came through the whole of the meeting, was the concerns regarding going forward. How is it all going to be resourced? And they don't seem to have
resources. That's the question.
There isn't a plan in place.
No, a governance structure or whatever. It doesn't seem to be there.
The free stuff.
I think
they need to start at least. It doesn't seem to be that they're thinking too much in detail about how they're going to resource the stuff that's going to need funding, and I think that.
Just saying.
It's also statutory. Considering it's supposed to be, he said very strongly it's statutory, which means it has to be done. Statutory, not having resources to do something statutory, I mean, worries me that.
I just think.
I think. I mean,
there needs to be a protocol in place where certain agreed resources are for doing the actions. It's as simple as that.
For me, I think, just to reiterate, I think there's a plan that's developing that's getting some support here. They are reliant at the moment on the free bits, and there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of a deep thought about where the resources are going to come from, and I think that's a concern, and I think we should be recommending that they spend some time focusing on where they're going to get this resource from, whether it's from Welsh Government, of course, because, you know, if Welsh Government is asking all of this collaborative working in this plan, then they should be funding some of it and not expecting the individual bodies that are already under great financial strain to be finding or repurpose financing for this.
To remove the recommendation on that.
Yeah, so just going back to the example around fly tipping, and Dewi from the fire service was saying, you know, the financial burden upon the fire service because of fly tipping and the fires that are associated with waste. And I think it became quite obvious to all of us that if we work together a bit better, the money that we're spending could actually probably be reduced.
Cost-benefit analysis is called.
And it felt, I think, from what Rachel was saying, as though there is going to be the emphasis on the PSB to spend their existing resources more wisely.
Yeah.
So I think as a committee, you may want to, you know, at a future meeting, request some kind of protocol strategy for how projects are going to be financed going forward, because I think ultimately that does feel like a bit of a sticking block at the moment.
Could I say about the fly tipping was interesting, because what essentially he was talking about was cost-benefit analysis there, and it sounded like the fire people and the police have got a very good grasp on that. It's stuff they do all the time. You know, a prevention agenda, and the because that's something that we brought up 20 years ago in the community council. Funny enough.
I think the problem there is that at the moment you've got different bodies that are funding different aspects of that. Until there is a pooled resource, then the council are not going to change their stance, or unlikely to change their stance, when 52% of fires are fly tipping related. The impact financially on the fire service, to take the money to alleviate that problem, that percentage would need to come from an action from the council, which would have a financial negative impact on the council. Until there's some sort of pooled resources here, that type of discussion is unlikely to get a positive outcome, because the finance that is currently being covered by the fire service, an example, would need to be covered by elsewhere. So I think, you know, pooled resources in that particular instance would be the way forward.
Totally agree with Liz on that. And I was going to talk about pooled resources, and I think we ought, and we talked about pooled resources in more than one place.
We did.
And I think we ought to put something in there just to emphasise we think pooled resources is important in the future. Maybe we could couch a recommendation in terms of the committee would like, because you've told us they're developing ideas, we'd like to be kept informed of when pooled resources agreements are formed. Something we want to be, you know, because...
What I'm thinking is they need something in that process where they've actually got some money experience. It's the one thing that's lacking there. Think about it. No, they haven't got any accountant. They need something like a research accountant in there, because that's the one experience they've got. They've got all the other people that are really good at research and stuff like that, but they haven't got somebody that looks at the financial implications. But these guys are good.
I've had a lot of experience of partnership working in statutory organisations, and to my mind, the stumbling block is always they're all great at talking and developing plans, but it's actually when you have to put money on the table. And we talked about it in terms of the one-stop shop. You know, there's a number of areas we talked about it. So I think, I mean, there's not going to be a quick answer to this, because in fairness to Lyndon, he's going to tell us that, you know, they're developing objectives. It's a 5-year time frame, the first phase, but we ought to put something in there about pool budgets, and we'd like to be kept informed of when the pool budget proposals emerge. So something like around that. And can I go on to another one?
Go on.
we had a nice, useful discussion on affordable housing, and we accepted that they're going to keep that in an area plan. But I think we did say we're going to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
So we need to ask that we be kept informed, specific about what they're doing around affordable housing, because I think Liz and I said they're an area that we all get the residents coming to us about. So, and if you're going to deal with well-being, if we don't get housing, employment, some of these big issues sorted, we'll never improve well-being. And affordable housing affects our most vulnerable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I brought up about change of use of transport, because that issue, I'm not convinced they've gone anywhere near that. So I know they've got, by 2050, they've got to go over to electric. You put a bit about electric points. They've got to look at a whole change of attitude. I mean, Cardiff's gone there. We haven't anywhere near it. So can you bring in a bit about alternative, walking, cycling, electric transport? We really need to flag that up around here, because I know we're looking at the metro and stuff like that, but we're not looking at what we're doing in infrastructure locally. And it affects on a whole lot of things. So I think that would be...
I'm concerned, and it goes back to the money side of it, though. Yeah. I am concerned that this plan we've not focused, or they've not focused yet, on how this is going to be delivered without money, or if it needs to be delivered and needs money, where is that money coming from? And it seems to me that there is an awful lot of agreement to participate, and I love seeing that. I love seeing how much all of these organisations are willing, but without the money to achieve it's not going to deliver. And it is, and you can have your one hits and you have your free stuff, but the nitty-gritty bones of it and the real important stuff without finance isn't going to go anywhere. And are we then is this just another document that is tick boxing? And that's the concern for me overall, over anything else. It's how this is going to be funded, and there's yet nothing that I heard around the table today that's focusing on that.
I mean, Cardiff's put £10 million in to cycleways because it can't do roads. It's a lot of money. We ain't got anywhere near it. I mean, we're just tiddling around with something in Brighton, to be honest. I mean, it's great, but we've not done it.
I think Cardiff's a lot bigger than...
I know it's a lot bigger.
A lot more money, don't
But, I mean, look at the issue we've got with the road in the middle. It just says it all, doesn't it? And I'm just giving an example. That's an insurmountable object. If you're going to get things done, without putting electric points in, if we've got to do electric cars by 2050, it sounds a long way off. It's not. So,
I think, Chair, the point about the resources is one that we really do need to focus on. And we can't be the only authority that's raising that concern.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be a lot of other local authorities looking at this plan are going to be thinking the same. And maybe Welsh Government do need to relook at it and see if there is some funding they can put into it to start it.
I think you'll find with technology, right, you will have a sudden influx of electric vehicles. At the moment, they're more in the design stage, right? You won't go in now that'll do 100 mile on a full charge. Now, you go to Asda, where they go in Brimmo shopping, you've got 2 charging points there. All you see there is cars parked in there. Nobody's charging in there. But I think there'll come a time when it'll rush upon you, and it'll be like technology. Look at the phones we got now compared to what I first bought. And I think that's what happened. And then I think, and they say, right, come on in now. But you've got to reduce the price. And
you didn't think, 5 years ago, you only think of a drone, would you, really? The technology just gets coming so quickly, it's unbelievable. No, I agree with you there.
The entire plan is Welsh Government. Welsh Government want us to do this, therefore they can't expect us to deliver a 15-year plan, 5, 10, 15. They can't expect us to deliver, and all of the organisations together, they can't expect us to deliver that with no money. And that is the nuts and bolts of it, really. The overarching problem is that.
I'm mindful of the fact we're going to kick us out in a minute. Anything more burning? No, I think you've done really well. Thank you, folks.
Excellent. I think point I wanted to make was, and I did earlier, was there was a little bit of, I wouldn't say argument, but a little bit of that. What's the name, Dewey?
That was interesting, wasn't it?
He was very interesting where he was.
Very, very interesting.
And I thought, well, he's actually saying that they pay your money out when the council has just let people charge him down the tip. And you can see around there that, you know, these two by year. So I think the council have really got to look at that, the charges down the tip. Really got to look at it.
What you were saying is, because I've been on the county council 25 years, and 5 years in, we said, please don't charge. And that's been an issue all along. It was an issue brought up.
I think as a comment, it was going to go to Peter, who's going to take it forward next week as part of his discussions around.
They're going to back it into long grass as they did it before.
Waste is being looked at. Can I come in, Chair?
Yeah, go on. They're not going to play with that.
Yeah, waste is when waste is being. I can share the papers with you. Like that, waste is being looked at by the Clean and Green Committee next week. Yeah. And charges for waste is on the agenda. I've already seen that. So rather than us kick that off to Lyndon, I did make the point that I don't think we need to
agree with you. I would suggest we put it in our recommendations and you take it on as well. Okay. Simply because he made that point there, and for a cost-benefit analysis from the fire, I keep wanting to call it fire brigade, it's probably name for the fire service, isn't it? Yeah. He made the point that he's having a tidy up mess that's actually something the local authority deals with, and the point he was making was that from his point of view, it would be better if it was free and it would cost less, I think is what he said. Now, that's a point that was made 20 odd years ago down at Community Council, was also one of the partners in that. And there's a whole thing going on there. If we're working in partnership, you know, I'm sure you've heard it before as well, haven't you, Colette? Thinking about this whole business about we might charge 25 quid to take 3 items down to get fly tip. That argument goes on all the time. Now bring it up the way, but this, you know, it's what we need.
Can I suggest then if the wording ought to be something along the lines that the officer presenting the waste paper to the committee next week covers off that point.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So he raised. Yeah.
This is so good for this.
No. Yeah. We can ask. Okay. If the officer presenting, because the officer will obviously do an introductory bit, and he can cover off the element that Dewey raised about us charging could have its effect. You know, is it? Yeah. So I mean, the point I made was obviously we're going to be discussing this next week, but the specific which you've just suggested, Stuart, is
we need to keep that in.
Yeah, you want. So if we ask and then somebody, I mean, they haven't got much time to do that because the committee meeting is Wednesday next week.
What would they? Sorry. Referring to something in the LDP there, which I kept picking up. Now we've got to put a reference back to the LDP as well, local development plan. They kept saying about LDP there all the time.
That was in relation to the one question about housing, etc., about affordable housing.
It was, wasn't
it? There is an element, he was correct really, in that affordable housing, etc., is usually part and parcel of your LDP and your planning process.
Yeah.
And so for them to pick up, to have yet another group looking at the same thing, it's wasting resources, and I get that.
So we don't do that one?
No.
Okay, no, good. But
sorry, going back to this, flies have been. I think the point that's being made is until we get to that land of pooled resources, you're going to struggle to get any movement.
Exactly my point.
The council isn't going to
make that observation.
The council isn't going to decide to remove charging until you've got that agreement that actually Fire Brigade is going to financially benefit from doing that, and therefore are going to financially support the council's move. So I think you may at this moment struggle to, you know, get buy-in until the PSB moves to a place where resources are being pooled and there is some sort of protocol that's in place.
But we're making this scrutiny.
A single issue is down to money. It's yes, it's public money, and that's the comment that he made quite rightly. It's public money, but if the budget implication to actually make changes, the budget implication for those individual organisations around the table change, and so there needs to be buy-in to financially supporting this by all of them. It isn't going to alter otherwise, in my opinion. Even though it's public purse, it's affecting individual organisations' money. So we're always going to go back to pooling resources to cover this. And underlying all of this is that is the biggest issue.
But that is an observation to this scrutiny, which is across all those organisations. We make that observation. Absolutely. Yeah. Go. You okay now?
Yeah. So I just add in a final comment that the committee is okay with endorsing the plan, but appreciates that the devil is very much within the detail of
that expression.
All, the actual delivery of the projects on the ground and how those projects are going to be funded going forward.
I think that needs to be really, really emphasised.
I do think it needs to be strongly emphasised that
unanimously emphasised.
Microphones, folks.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be emphasised that pooling resources is the only way that this is really going to be delivered with any, in its entirety, really. I think that's the...
I think the committee is unanimous on that one. Because without resources, where the hell are they going?
And we haven't got a sort of date and time of the next meeting and what we'd be looking at, but I think it would be a good idea if, in the same way as all the other Torvine scrutiny committees undertake a visioning session, that this committee did the same, pulled in partners and members of the executive as well, in order to really get an understanding of what it is they're going to be pushing forward in the next year and how this committee is going to could be involved and have a serious input.
Could you make? There's one obvious thing. Also, this meeting is going to take 2.5 hours. It's never going to take 2 hours. It's now 5:30. Thank you, folks. I think that we've done well there. That wasn't easy. It's a good meeting.